Welcome students. Today I will explain you about the criticism of Darwinism. Then after the discussion about the criticism, nextly I shall discuss with you about the new Darwinism. The new Darwinism, otherwise called as modern synthetic theory. Let us come to know about the criticism of Darwinism. We people know the Darwin theory received widespread approval from 1859 to 1900. And this period is known as Romantic period of Darwinism. In 1900, Mendel's principle of heredity came into light through the device, coherence, and test mark. Since then, the validity of Darwinism was subjected to serious doubts and criticism. Some of the important objections are noted in here. See, shortly say, a number of evolutionists work on the theory of natural selection and objected severely Darwin's theory of natural selection. The objections which are generally arise in there, they are summarized in here, one after one. I described these objections through the 10 different points to you. Please be serious about the criticism of Darwinism. First of all, the Darwinism has a basis of artificial selection. Darwin postulated a theory which people known as the Darwinism, and that one based upon the artificial selection. Actually, the naturalist Darwin, or you say evolutionist, he based on the nature. Secondly, it is objected that natural selection might explain the survival, but not the arrival of fittest. Before I stated a line, actually his theory based upon the nature. Okay, Darwinism here explains the survival of the fittest, but does not explain the arrival of the fittest. Okay, then point 3, Darwinism considered minute, gradual, and fluctuating variations to explain the natural selection, but these variations are mostly non-heritable. Fourth point, natural selection must not be viewed unless the characters, because if they are large, they become eminence. On the reverse, if they are unless characters are independent of natural selection, then why must the adapted characters arise through natural selection? There is one question here. Fifth point, over-specialization indicates the inadequacy of natural selection because the organs such as your hog antelopes of the iris deer led to the extinction because they became over-specialized. After this point, you consider the sixth point as the objection. The extreme rudimentation of any structure does not meet any satisfactory explanation based upon the Darwinism as the vestigial hind limbs of whale. To say that an organ is no longer useful and hence the disappears is to state the effect and not the cause. Nextly, you consider the seventh point. That is one objection here. Darwin, although to the best of his efforts, criticized the Lamarckism, but whenever he made any difficulty, he bent upon the Lamarckism. And that effects of use and disuse of organs are inherited. Nextly, point 8, the special objection are raised against the theory of sexual selection, which refers to the passive or passivity on the part of the male and choice on the part of the female for a more attractive male. And the ninth point of the objection is here. He did not distinguish as somatic germinal variation. His pangenesis hypothesis has no basis at all. Lastly, I put forth here the 10th objection of the Darwinism. Unless unfavorable variety occurs in a large number of individuals at the same time, the characters would be the swept out by intercrossing with the individuals not possessing them. Isolation theories have been put forward to account for it. Okay, I already depicted the 10 differential objection points on the basis of the criticism on the concept of Darwin, which one called as Darwinism. Okay, and to based upon them, we people can study its the points as analytical manner further to you. And Darwin is a discussion in my points. The Darwin explains the survival of the fittest, but does not explain the what? The avail of the fittest. Secondly, this theory is based upon the small variation, but does not explain the usefulness of an organ in its initial stage. Third, Darwin thought minute fluctuating variations as principal factors of the natural selection, but they are mostly non-heritable. He considered the spurts of the salation and variation as the rare, but they are more frequent as we see to. And fourth is there, the theory does not explain the effect of use and disuse and the presence of the vestigial organs. Next, you see in that analysis, he did not differentiate between the somatic and germinal variations. And another point also arises there, he could not explain the over-specialization of the particular structure through the nature selection and example, your antlers of the extinct iris deer is the best example for it. Lastly, Darwin thought the somatic cells of the body produce the minute particles, that is called as the pangenes, which is carried by the blood and accumulated in the germ cells. And such each germ cell is a minute copy of the parent body, which could be developed into the adult through the reproduction. But such hypothesis is totally baseless. It is not accepted by the other workers and scientists. Hence, the natural selection is not the only pathway for the evolution. Neither it is creative force, but it is just guiding factor. Thank you. Good morning. Okay, I already depicted to you about the criticism of the Darwinism. I will be explained nextly about the new Darwinism. What is new Darwinism? You see, some workers also worked on the Darwinism. Those latter workers have greatly modified the Darwin concepts of Darwin theory. This modified theory makes many objections, effectless, and is also known as neo-Darwinism. These new changes occurred after the rediscovery of the Mendel's work in 1900. The new Darwinisms accept the non-inheritable nature of the phenotypic variations. So, they have no evolutionary value. Weismann offer the germinal selection theory, explaining the origin in the germ cell of those variations which are heritable. Other neo-Darwinism have shown that many mutations are the minute and are no greater than your fluctuating the variations of the Darwin, but they are inheritable. The theory of your panmixia put forward by the Weismann has been most successful, explaining the rudimentation of organs. Thus, it is apparent that unless or even harmful characters are like in the inheritance with characters of supreme selective value. Please bear in mind, I already gave the introduction regarding the neo-Darwinism to you. Now, I explain these new Darwinisms, and that is otherwise called as modern synthetic theory, to you detail. In the light of our recent knowledge in genetics, the molecular biology and the cell biology, the Darwinism has been modified and is accepted today in a synthetic form known as the neo-Darwinism. Germplasm theory of Weismann, mutation theory of D. Vallis, Mendel laws of inheritance, Wagner's expression in 1868 at the factor of isolation, and population dynamics have modified original Darwin's theory. Darwinsky in 1937 in his book Genetics of Origin of Species has provided the basis of the theory, and Huxley 1942 has distinguished that the theory as synthetic theory. And due to designated this theory, and Huxley was popular in that time, Huxley in 1942 has designated this theory as the word name of the synthetic theory. The contributions of Muller in 1949, Fischer in 1958, Wright in 1968, Mayer in 1970, and G.L. Stevens in 1966 to 76 have given a final shape to this theory, which one is known as New Darwinism or Modern Synthetic Theory. The following, the description generally brought a clear-cut idea about the modern synthetic theory and new Darwinisms, and that can be summarized on the different points through the basis of the process, and 5 basic processes also there with 2 accessory factors as the chief ingredients of this theory. I go in detail about them. In this discussion you find the 5 basic process and 2 accessory factors. Aggregatively you find 7 points in there. And these basic process and factors aggregatively are summarized in 7 different points. First point is gene mutation. Sudden change in a gene. Gene is remaining within the chromosome. Inside the chromosome you find the DNA. In each gene you also find the fragment of DNA. And due to radiations, light, temperature, etc., brings about the permanent phenotypic changes in the individual. This discussion can be mentioned within one term, that is nothing, that is called as gene mutation. Gene mutation. For this point, I explain in local language like Odia. तुमे जदि निकटस्थ डाक्तर पाखक जाई तमे जदि अनुरोध कर दे मोर एटा एक्सरे करि दियंतु बा सीटी स्कैन करि दियंतु, डाक्तर तत्क्षणात आपनको मना करि दब। काहे कि थरे एक्सरे करले बा थरे सीटी स्कैन करले से जो रेडिएशन आसीबो, लाइट रो रेडिएशन एवं जो टेम्परेचर प्रोवाइड करिवो ताहा तुमर क्रोमोसोम रो थिबा जीन उपरे प्रभाव पकेइबो बा डीएनए स्ट्रक्चर उपरे प्रभाव पकेइबो। जाउ प्रभाव फलरे तुमर कोनोसी एक जीन रो परिवर्तन फलरे तुमर चरित्र रो परिवर्तन आसी पारे, त शारीरिक चरित्र रो परिवर्तन आसी पारे बा तुमर हेरिटरी को बेस करी तुमर जेनेटिकल कैरेक्टर रो मत परिवर्तन आसी जाई पारे। सेति पाई पूर्ण मात्रा रे परिवर्तन भी हमारा लक्षण देखा जाए जेते बेले गुणसूत्र बा जीन रो परिवर्तन परिलक्षित हुए ତାକୁ ଆମେ ଓଡ଼ିଆରେ କ'ଣ କହୁ? ଗୁଣସୂତ୍ରର ପରିବର୍ତ୍ତନ, ତତ୍କ୍ଷଣାତ ପରିବର୍ତ୍ତନ, ଯାହାକୁ ଇଂଲିଶରେ କୁହାଯାଏ ଜିନ୍ ମ୍ୟୁଟେସନ। ଆସ ଦେଖିବା ତାହେଲେ ଏଠି ଆମେ ଆମର ନିକଟସ୍ଥ ଯେଉଁମାନେ ଡାକ୍ତର ଅଛନ୍ତି ସେମାନଙ୍କ ଠାରୁ ଆମେ ଯଦି ଏଭଳି ଭାବରେ ଉତ୍ତର ପାଉ, ଆମେ ନିଶ୍ଚିତ ଭାବରେ ଆମେ ନିହାତି ଭାବରେ ସତର୍କ ରହିବା ଯେ ନିହାତି ଭାବରେ ଜିନ୍ର ମ୍ୟୁଟେସନ ଘଟେ। ଜିନ୍ର ମ୍ୟୁଟେସନ ହବାର ଅନେକ ପ୍ରକାର ପ୍ରୋବାବିଲିଟି ଅଛି ବୋଲି ଏଇଥିରୁ ଜଣାପଡ଼ିଲା। ତେଣୁ ସେଇ କନସେପ୍ଟଟାକୁ ଏଥିରେ ଏଷ୍ଟାବ୍ଲିଶ କରାଗଲା, ଯାହାକୁ ଆମେ ଜିନ୍ ମ୍ୟୁଟେସନ କହୁ। ସେକେଣ୍ଡ ପଏଣ୍ଟ, ଦ କ୍ରୋମୋଜୋମାଲ ମ୍ୟୁଟେସନ। ଯଦି ଜିନ୍ର ମ୍ୟୁଟେସନ ହେଲା, କ୍ରୋମୋଜୋମାଲ ମ୍ୟୁଟେସନ ହେବା ସ୍ୱାଭାବିକ। ତେଣୁ ଚେଞ୍ଜ ଅଫ ଦି କ୍ରୋମୋଜୋମ ନମ୍ବର or chromosomal aberration and chromosome structure also be contribute the significantly in phenotypic change। बेले बेले chromosomal aberration हो जाए due to X-ray or due to what radiation or due to heavy light and temperature, that case also be arised। आमे जानी छे निकटरे आमर जापान उपरे अमेरिका दुईटी बोमा पकईला, हिरोशिमा और नागासाकी उपरे, ଏବଂ ସେଇ ନ୍ୟୁକ୍ଲିୟର ବମ୍ର ଚାର୍ଜ ହେବା ଫଳରେ ତା ପର ଜେନେରେସନର ଜାପାନୀ ମାନଙ୍କର ଦେହରେ ବିକୃତି ଆସିଲା। ତେଣୁ କ୍ରୋମୋଜୋମାଲ ଆବେରିଏସନ ସେଠି ଘଟିଲା ଏବଂ ସେମାନଙ୍କର କ୍ରୋମୋଜୋମାଲ ବିହେଭିୟର ଚେଞ୍ଜ ଆସିଲା। ଏଇ ବିହେଭିୟର ଚେଞ୍ଜଟାକୁ ଆମେ କହିଲୁ କ୍ରୋମୋଜୋମାଲ ମ୍ୟୁଟେସନ। ଓକେ, ତେଣୁ ଏହା ଜରିଆରେ ତାଙ୍କ ବିକୃତି ହେଇକରି ସେମାନେ ବିଭିନ୍ନ ରୋଗରେ ଆକ୍ରାନ୍ତ ହେଲେ। ସ୍ପେସିଆଲି କିଛି ବର୍ଷ ଧରି ସେମାନଙ୍କର ଡ୍ୱାର୍ଫିଜିମ୍ସ ଆସିଲା ଏବଂ ତାଙ୍କ ଦେହରେ ବିଭିନ୍ନ ପ୍ରକାରର ସବୁ କ୍ୟାନ୍ସର ସେଲ୍ ଡେଭଲପ୍ କଲା। ତେଣୁ ଏଇଟା ଏକ ଭାଇଟାଲ ମୋଷ୍ଟ ପଏଣ୍ଟ ବା ଇମ୍ପୋର୍ଟାଣ୍ଟ ପଏଣ୍ଟ, କ୍ରୋମୋଜୋମାଲ ମ୍ୟୁଟେସନ। ଥାର୍ଡ, that is recombination, the reshuffling of the genes due to the crossover the lead to the genetic variability of the total gene pool and thus results in the variations of the characters. It is one type of manipulation and that is recombination. A recombination means here the reshuffling of the genes due to the crossing over lead to the genetic variability of the total gene pool and thus results in the variation of the characters. It is also possible by it. Isolation. The next point, isolation, and it is the mechanisms by which the species is divided into the small populations and each population lives independently in a well-defined the territory. Isolation may be geographical or reproductive or physiological, and such the barriers do not permit interbreeding among the different populations. Finally, each population may lead to the emergence of a new species. Okay? And these are the 5 basic points. I already explained to you, these are the 5 basic processes. And nextly, I shall explain you about the 2 accessory factors by these 2 points. One is called as genetic drift, other one is called as hybridization. Listen, regarding the genetic drift. In a small population of the gene, frequencies are found to be what? The fluctuate and purely by chance of the factors. And these random changes in gene frequencies is not under the control of natural selection and is called genetic drift by soil right, and this force has to tendency to eliminate less frequent alleles to attain the homozygosity and lowers the amount of the variability. As a result, what happened? Either the population would be extinct, or if it withstands the selection pressure would lead to formation of a new species. Okay? and that concept would be explained in a single term, that is called genetic drift. Last point, that is also one factor named as the hybridization, that interbreeding among the individuals of the different populations of a species result in the introduction of the new genes in the gene pool of a population, and hybridization could also take place between the individuals of closely related species, and the offsprings exhibit characteristics somewhat different from both the parents and may form the new species. In this manner, the new species would be formed in our the area or locality. Okay, and evolution is a never-ending process. Time to time, I explain the same line to you. It will go on the operating so long as there is mutation and organism possesses heritable variation. The final goal is to reach the perfection. But no organization is perfect, and improvement in a body design is the limitless and timeless. Okay? And you know clearly evolution is a trend process. It is a never-ending process, remember. However, this is not applicable for human beings. The biological evolution is being tempered and arrested through cultural evolution of human beings. Thank you all. I finished in the teaching about the modern synthetic theory or new Darwinism. You see, the modern synthetic theory generally postulated by the workers or scientists after the Darwin, they can generally based upon the concept of the Darwinism, but maximum modification generally developed on the Darwinism or theory of the Darwin, which was designed in Newton, that is called as new Darwinism, or that is called as neo-Darwinism. New Darwinism, otherwise known as neo-Darwinism, N-E-O, neo-Darwinism. Which are named as new Darwinism, also it is called as the modern synthetic theory. In this manner, you can recall about the neo-Darwinism or new Darwinism. Thank you.